Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let's come back in here. I would love to hear, based on our community time question, one response from each table, please. One response from each table. Let's start right over here. Yes, correct. There's no one back there. I should preface, yeah.
Well, now I have the power bestowed upon me. No, I was just saying, Jordan was just sharing how wonderful Carolyn cares for him and their family as they raise a tiny human and keep a dog alive and things, and how they partner together. So that was cute.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. I'd love to hear from this middle table right here. What did you guys talk about? I'll bring the mic over if you guys want.
It said my wife Katie cares for me because she plans most meals. Yeah, wives are gonna dominate this conversation.
Feels like the men might be trying to get out of the doghouse or something to do this morning. Oh, okay. All right. Sure, Janelle. I really appreciate you saying that. That's really sweet. Thank you. What a way to honor our spouses and partners this morning. Yeah, let's hear from this table right here. This table.
When I gave birth to my first kiddo, it was just a real gift to be surrounded by the church. I think I realized just the people that came out of the woodwork that I wouldn't even call like good friends that brought me our family meals, and then my sister-in-law who came especially down from where she was living like a few hours away just to sort of take care of me in particular. Anyway, it was a very distinct moment when I just felt like I was not alone.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And then last but not least, this table back here. She said, listen. I love that. Gotcha. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's care. Keeping people alive. That's like the basic foundation of care, right? I love it. Cool. No worries. All right. Well, the title for today's teaching is Was John the Favorite? And I would like to tell a story of my own about a time where I really received care. What I was really hoping to have a discussion about through that is love languages. And so not everyone is familiar with that language. So I wanted to make the question a little more open-ended. Love languages, there's several of them. And this in its most basic form is describing how we were made to both give and receive love from others in community. We were made with this inherent interconnectedness that keeps us in relationship with one another. And we've all have different unique ways that we show that love and receive that love as well. And so some of those are words of affirmation, quality time, gift giving, acts of service, and I think that's it. Did I miss anything, y'all? Physical touch. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And so one way that I would say that you can gauge what your love language is in your closest relationships, in your closest friendships, even in your family. What would people describe you as? And what are some of the qualities they would do so to describe you? And one of them that I remember one time, I can't really remember how we got into this discussion, but Danielle and I were talking and we were like, if you could just use one word to describe your partner or your friend or whatever you want to do, what would you use? I would say do it with people close to you. And for me, she said intentional. And I really appreciate that. But also, I think it coincides with what my love language is, which my top one, I would say, you don't have to put yourself in a box. This is just helpful to put language into how you give and receive love, is quality time. Quality time. To me, it doesn't matter how much time you give me. It matters about how much attention and care that you are giving me in the present. It could be 5 minutes of uninterrupted conversation. I just appreciate the presence and the ability to really be fully present in a conversation. I don't remember where I picked this up, but when I was younger, I think my parents really taught me the importance of eye contact. And at times, I have caught myself unintentionally intimidating people by like looking them straight in the eyes when they're talking to me. But I realize that's part of just quality time is when someone is talking to me, I really want to make sure I'm looking them in the eyes and connecting with them. And I can remember a time in my life where someone really gave me quality time when I really desperately needed it. This was about 6 years ago, and I had started my very first job. and my mom had just passed away. It was pretty difficult for me. And so I was driving to a training for my job at the time, and I got into a car accident. And so then I had to call someone to come and get me and take me to the training. And then because I didn't have a car, someone had to take me to, it was like 2 days of training that was a little more intimate setting, and then 2 days of like large group training. Well, someone had to take me back to the city because we were in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. And so this man who actually shared my last name, and I could not find a picture of him. His name was Jerry Wheeler. And so I got to ride back with Jerry to the Twin Cities. It was like a 2-hour ride. And I was pretty emotionally vulnerable at the time, I could say. I just crashed my car and was still grieving my mother's death. And he just took the time in that car ride to be fully present with me and to just show love and care through spending quality time with me. And those moments gave me so much peace. I didn't know Jerry very well, but those moments where he took the time to care for me and to listen to me and to make me feel understood in ways that I hadn't in months, they illustrated to me the love of God that I really needed to see in that moment and to feel in that moment as well. That short time, even though it was just probably about 2 hours, caused me to build trust with Jerry and to feel safe with him. And trust is a really, really fickle thing. It can be earned very, very quickly, maybe in a period of just 2 hours, but it also can become eroded very, very quickly through a betrayal or through something bigger than that. And this kind of reminds me of a theory from psychology. And what I mean by this is honestly how I was introduced to this is how a lot of people are introduced to a lot of therapy talk, so to speak, is through Reels and through TikTok. I'll just be totally honest. But it did start a journey of discovery to figure out how this fleshes itself out in my closest relationships. And this theory is called attachment theory. And this theory basically just in an essence, it describes how we operate, our patterns of operation in our closest relationships. This is largely determined and a large predictor of our attachment style, so to speak, is our relationships with our most immediate caregivers when we are younger. This doesn't mean we're stuck in that box forever, but it just is helpful language to give voice to what our initial relationships were like in our families of origin. And I'll just give a very brief quote from the guy who founded attachment theory, John Bowlby. Next slide, please, Kara. That's not it. It should have a heart on it. There we go. John Bowlby said, attachment is a deep and enduring emotional bond that connects one person to another across time and space. So if you think about attachment, this is simply describing the close emotional bonds that we have with others. This reminds me of a bond that Jesus had with one of his disciples. And rather than give you a list of all the different attachment styles, I'll quickly name them off. There's secure attachment, there's anxious attachment, there's avoidant attachment, and fearful avoidant. And rather than give you a huge explanation of them, I just want to give you an example of a really healthy attachment that Jesus had to one of his disciples, that he had with all of his disciples, but specifically one that has stood out to me in particular in the scriptures. Now, this comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 23 through 25. And to give some context here, this is John the Evangelist. So there are likely 3 different Johns in the Bible, and this one is John the Evangelist. So he is the one who wrote the scriptures. Some scholars think that he was likely Jesus's cousin. We're not completely sure on that, but that can give us an idea of why he called himself the disciple whom Jesus loved. Now, this seems like a really arrogant statement to make on the surface, right? It's basically calling yourself the rabbi's pet, right? Like you're the teacher's pet who comes in and brings the apple, or the one who says, "Didn't we have homework we had to turn in today?" or something like that. But I think the other disciples understood the connection that Jesus and John had because John was likely one of the youngest of the disciples. And so they were aware of this and were okay with it. I mean, there was some competition among the disciples. We don't need to get into that, but largely it seems as if they were okay with this arrangement, so to speak. And so John mentions this phrase. He's also the guy who likely wrote this gospel. And when he's recalling himself, he recalls himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved 6 different times. And I want to give a specific example in John 13. This is kind of the Last Supper scene a little bit. And Jesus, it's a pretty intense conversation. It is a conversation the disciples are kind of staring at one another after Jesus has just said, "Hey, one of you is going to betray me." And I want to read this scene right here. It says, "One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, 'Ask him which one he means.' Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, 'Lord, who is it?'" So some of the details in this, the specifics of the story don't matter as much as the actions and the portrayal of a deep relationship that I see in this. One of them is John is recounting how later on, how his teacher was betrayed by one of his close friends as well. And the one thing that he remembers is to call himself the disciple whom Jesus loved. That's the one thing. And he remembers that he was reclining next to Jesus. Now, the message translation, Kara, if you can move to the slide with the message, says one of the disciples, the one Jesus loved dearly, was reclining against him, his head on his shoulder. And I love that picture that in the midst of conflict, among his closest friends, the people he had spent a ton of time with, what John recounts and remembers is that Jesus loved him enough. Jesus loved him, and he was the object of his affection, and also that he felt confident and secure enough in that love that he could just recline against his shoulder, that he felt safe enough in his attachment to Jesus to just recline securely against his shoulder. I think about the picture that gives us. Often when we can see our attachment styles, and I'm not going to give you a prediction of what you are today because I'm not trained to do that at all, but we can see them come out, the negative side effects of them, the fractured parts of our relationships and our family of origin when we go through conflict. Especially that brings it out. I know it brings it out in me, especially. And I love that when John is recounting this time of major conflict and tension, all he remembers is how safe he felt around Jesus, is how confident, secure, and relaxed he felt in the love of this God with skin on Jesus. And so I love that again and again, John describes himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. I love that this picture of him just resting on his shoulder in a time of great conflict and tension. And I especially love that there's some translations that just say he was sitting next to him, which isn't accurate. Not to throw shade, but I'm throwing shade. But the Greek actually said he was resting his head on his bosom. So it's giving a very intimate picture of how of the portrayal of Jesus and John. And this also made me think about identity as well. When I think of my relationship to Jesus, when I think of him, do I think of myself as the object of his love and affection? Do I think of myself as the person who Jesus loves? And I'll tell you a little bit of background on me. I would say I likely have more of an anxious attachment style. I don't really know where this came from. Christian Ann and I might dig into it someday. She might want to explore that with me, but I don't know where that came from. But especially in times of conflict, I need to know that whoever it is, my friend, my spouse, is not going to leave. That they're not going to leave when things get hard. And I really need the reassurance that they're still there. And that even if there's perceived distance that I perceive, notice, or distance that is really there, that they're not going anywhere. Another moment in the scriptures that I really love, where I feel like this applies in regards to our relationship to Jesus, is in the prodigal son. The parable of the two sons and the loving father is what I like to call it, because it focuses on both sons, not just one. But anyway, one of the first reactions that the father has to the prodigal son who is coming back, it says that while he was still a long way off, he ran to greet him. And so there is no amount of distance, whether perceived or whether actual reality, that can change the secure attachment that you have in Jesus. There's no, I love in the song Reckless Love, the bridge just says, there's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no thing that you have done or thing you can do to cause there to be enough of a rift in your relationship with Jesus where he will leave you, where he will depart from you. He will always be there, regardless if that distance is felt or if it might be some sort of reality for you as well. And then Jesus also deals with the older son similarly. He's kind of complaining about what's going on, how his brother's being greeted. And then he says these words. He says, "My son, you are always with me. Everything that I have is yours." What reassurance Jesus gives to us, regardless of our attachment style, that he is always going to be there and that there's nothing that can stand in the way of our relationship to him. Now, the good news about our attachment styles is that they can be healed. Regardless of where you started from in our fractured human families, they can be healed. And how they can be healed is through simply asking for what you need. Now, there may be something that you need from God that maybe you haven't addressed between you and God. Maybe you felt some sort of distance. Maybe you felt some sort of betrayal, like, God, where are you in this? I would encourage you to ask God for what you need, because God is a really, really good parent. And God knows how to meet us in our moments of need and provide for what we need. And so I would encourage you to think about, what do I need from God in order to feel more securely attached, in order to feel more safe? One thing about love is that it does kind of make us feel, regardless of how we give and receive our love, it kind of makes us feel like we are the favorite, whoever's giving that to us. And so was John the favorite? I don't know. But maybe he just felt like the favorite. And that's still beautiful. And I think something we can take in, and something I know that I have seen and experienced the love of God that makes me feel as if I am the only one in the room, the disciple whom Jesus loved. To answer that question, I also need to ask, was I Jerry's favorite? Sadly, Jerry passed away probably about a year after I had that moment with him. But I am so glad that that is a memory that I can look back on and say, hey, this is the legacy that this man left in my life. When you think of your moments with Jesus, when you think of your relationship to him, will you remember yourself being the favorite? Will you remember yourself being the disciple whom Jesus loved? I want you to take some time and just close your eyes. I'm going to take us through a little bit of an imaginative prayer exercise very shortly, and then we'll take time to share at our tables. So I just want you to close your eyes. Be present with your body. Maybe just take time to feel the ground underneath you and get comfortable. And I want you to put yourself in that scene of Jesus and John that I described. You're at the table with the other disciples and you're next to Jesus. What are you feeling when you're next to him? What are you noticing? What are you hearing? And then Jesus just leans over to you. And as you guys have kind of been in casual conversation, he asks, what do you need from me? Or how do you respond? I invite you just in your head to answer that question from Jesus. What do you need from me? Jesus, we have needs, but that does not make us needy. That just makes us human. And so I thank you that you provide for those needs. God, I thank you that our human relationships are just a small picture of the great love that you have for us that makes us feel like the favorite. Help us to be just like John, who when he remembered you, remembered himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved dearly. Help us to feel safe and secure in your love. Help us to ask for what we need because you're a good parent. Amen. All right. I'd invite you to take some time to just talk about that question at your table and take some time to debrief what you're feeling and experiencing as a result of that. We'll come back in a little bit with worship through song.